Good morning. Oh, I'm a bit stuffed up today, but anyhow, talking about two films today. Um, there's really just one big film that opened in Hong Kong yesterday, but I'll talk about that one second. First film I'm going to talk about is called JT LeRoy, which is not opening here for a couple of weeks. It's opening here at the end of the month, but we have, I think, at least 8 films opening that day. I've already seen 4 of them, and I think I'm going to see 2 more before that time. I'm obviously not going to, well, it's not obvious, but I'm not going to talk about all of them at one go because it'll just be insane. I'll be talking for 2 hours, and I don't want to do that. I'm not that interesting. And so I thought I'll try to get to some of them now. So anyhow, I'm talking about the film J.T. LeRoy. Now this is a very interesting story. It's based on a true story which I knew nothing about. I don't know where I was while this was all going on, but I never even heard of it. So it's the story has been called by some people as the literary hoax of our time. And what happened was in 1997, well, I know in 1997 I was busy with the handover here. I was busy celebrating. Little did we know back in 1997 that we'd be protesting. Well, I haven't been protesting, but other people have been protesting today on the streets. Anyhow, in 1997, Laura Albert, who was at the time a 30-something-year-old Brooklynite, she published a series of stories that were semi-autobiographical in nature. I think at the time they were marketed or pitched as autobiographical, but I think now we can all agree that they're semi-autobiographical. So she published a series of stories under the name J.T. LeRoy, and he wrote, and he was supposedly a teenager who was born in rural West Virginia in the early 1980s. Now, LeRoy, supposedly, he wrote about his tragic young life of abuse, addiction, prostitution, and homelessness, and more. And these stories were very raw and honest. I haven't read them, but this is what I've been told about this. And they touched a nerve with readers. And as a result, because of their appeal, it led Albert slash LeRoy to write the book Sarah, which is a story about LeRoy's mother, and this came out in the year 2000. Now, the book was an immediate bestseller, but everybody wanted to meet this person, this young man, LeRoy. And this started posing some problems for logistical problems for Albert, because everybody thought that they didn't know who she was, they knew who he was. And they thought they knew who he was. And she would give interviews, she would give phone interviews as LeRoy, so she would fake a voice as LeRoy, and this seemed to satisfy a few people, but it didn't satisfy enough. And what happened, what this led to, was she ended up recruiting her partner's sister by the name of Savannah Knoop, and she asked Savannah to become LeRoy for the adoring public. And their 5-year-long charade is recreated in this film called J.T. LeRoy. Again, I didn't know anything about this, never heard this at all. But a lot of people have read the book, and people are familiar with this. They say, "Yup." So this film is directed by Justin Kelly. He did a film a few years ago called I Am Michael. I'm still trying to get my hands on it. It's supposed to be very good. It was an indie film starring what's his name? Zachary Quinto. I think it's also based on a true story. If I remember correctly, I Am Michael is about 2 gay guys, and one of them goes very public and says he's no longer gay, and if I remember, that's what the story is about. And of course, you can't do that. But anyhow, I would like to see it. I heard it's a very good film. Anyhow, so he's directed this film. He co-wrote the screenplay along with Savannah Knoop, and it's based on her own 2007 memoir called Girl, Boy, Girl, How I Became J.T. LeRoy. This film is just, I got to separate this out. The story is, really, it's almost too bizarre to believe. Like, you watch this and you think, how did people not figure this out for 5 years? This is the amazing thing. And so what happened was Savannah would wear this ridiculous blonde wig and dark sunglasses to play LeRoy. That was the first part of it. And she would be very she wouldn't talk a lot. And, sort of look down. They wouldn't make eye contact with people. And but that really wasn't the half of it, because Laura, her sort of sister-in-law-ish, her brother's partner, and Laura, by the way, is played by Laura Dern, and Kristen Stewart plays Savannah. So Laura was with Savannah every step of the way, and she was pretending. She also had this crazy wig on, and she was pretending to be LeRoy's British friend / advisor / spokesperson, Speedy. And so she also wore this crazy wig. You would look at it, that's a wig. And she put on this really bad British accent. And and you think, how did people allow this to happen? And reading up about this, people, it's in hindsight, so many people say, oh yeah, I knew. And you think, no, they didn't. I don't know how they didn't know, but they didn't. If they knew, they didn't say anything. And what a lot of people have said who were there at the time, they said, yeah, we knew that this was weird. We knew that, that nobody really says we knew that Speedy was really Laura Albert, or was really J.T. LeRoy / Laura. Like, nobody says that, but they knew that these two were faking it. But maybe they just couldn't put their finger on it. I don't know. It just seems so bizarre. But one person who really was fooled was a European actress and filmmaker. In the movie, she's called Eva. She's played by Diane Kruger, who was in The Fade. She was the star of In the Fade, and she is really Asia Argento. Okay, just if you know the story, Asia Argento made a film in 2004 called "The Heart is Deceitful Above All Things," which is the title of one of Albert's books, and it's based on the book of LeRoy's book, and it premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in 2004 to less than favorable reviews. I've never seen it. I hear it's very difficult to watch. It's almost like abuse exploitation. There must be some word that talks about abuse exploitation, but I don't know what the word is. But anyhow, certainly she was fooled, because in the movie they show that she ends up well, I don't know that she's sleeping, but she's certainly making out with LeRoy, with Savannah, and Savannah even takes off the wig at one point. So Eva sees that it's a wig, but she still doesn't, she's just like going, whatever, very, very strange. But I think, to make this, for Argento or Eva to make this movie, to go all that way, shows that she was fooled. I mean, that's just amazing. Now, Argento, she's been in the news a lot lately because she was the partner of Anthony Bourdain prior to his death. She was a big spokesperson, excuse me, of the Me Too movement involving Harvey Weinstein. And then it came out a little while later that she herself was a perpetrator of sexual abuse against a young actor, and she did settle with him for a very large sum of money. So she is a very complicated person as well. None of that, of course, is dealt with in the movie, but I think you have to take anything Asia Argento says and does, or in the movie Eva, with a grain of salt. And she is a very complicated person. But anyhow, back to the movie. Now, when she was outed, it was very interesting. She's outed in the movie finally. But Laura says, and she said this in real life publicly, she says, is she a literary fraud, or is this just one of her literary avatars? the movie I'm going to talk about next is It Chapter Two, and one of the characters, Bill, who in It Chapter Two is played by James McAvoy. It's very clear that Bill is the literary avatar of Stephen King, and in fact, McAvoy was on Stephen Colbert last night, and he said that, and so that is no secret. So really, what did Laura Albert do that was so wrong? I mean, she took it to the next level. This was she created a person out of her literary avatar. So she says, and it's a very interesting thing. I mean, maybe she crossed the line. I don't know, but she says it was performance art. Hard to argue that, so it's very interesting. But unfortunately, given I'm trying to separate the story from the movie here, but now I got to talk about the movie. Unfortunately, that question, whether she's a literary fraud or is this performance art, that's not really dealt with in the movie, and the film leaves it for the viewers to decide on their own which is it as the credits roll. So even for me, after I've seen it, I'm going, I don't know. I can see both sides of this story. So, but I would say that she didn't hurt anybody financially. Hi, Donna. Nice to see you. It's our birthday coming up soon. 29 again. Anyhow, she didn't hurt anybody by her ruse. She did sign a film option contract with a production company under the LeRoy name, and she was found guilty by a judge for entering into an agreement under false pretenses, and she had to pay compensation. But other than that, very few people, if anyone, who read her books felt cheated. The stories are essentially true. She just wrote them from the perspective of a teenage boy rather than from her own. In fact, after this all came out, people did investigate whether these stories were true, these stories of abuse and prostitution and addiction, all this. And essentially they are true, but she just wrote them from a different perspective. So it's a little weird, but not really illegal, So anyhow, as strange but true as the story is, the unfortunate thing with this movie is that it lacks pizzazz, and it fails to delve very deeply into either Laura or Savannah's characters. So, that to me was disappointing. On the acting side, I'd say Dern seems to be having a blast playing all of Laura's crazy avatars. She's not just Speedy. She's Laura, another avatar by the name of Laura Victoria, who's a freelance phone sex operator. And she's clearly a little nutty, but the other problem is, as much as I liked her, unfortunately with Kristen Stewart, she doesn't seem to be able to find her footing as either Savannah or LeRoy. She's sort of very wishy-washy. And I've seen interviews with Savannah in recent years, and she's a more interesting character than what we see on the screen. So unfortunately, that was disappointing. And we from watching this movie, we don't really get any insight into who Savannah really is, and she really is she's an interesting character as well. So on the whole, I'd say I think this would have been a more interesting film if it was in more capable hands, if it would have addressed the big questions of identity and gender fluidity. But as it is, it's okay. But I wouldn't run out to the cinema to see it. Certainly, if it's on a streaming service, I don't know when or if it's on a streaming service yet, but it'll come to one. I'd say, yeah, check it out. But I wouldn't run out to the cinema. So it's coming here September the 26th. I'm not sure where else it's played or if it's played anywhere else yet. But it's all right. The story is more interesting than the treatment of the story, for sure. Now, if you do see the film, keep your eyes out for Courtney Love. She plays a Hollywood producer. Very interestingly, Love was one of the big name stars who were pals with LeRoy back in the day. This was 10, 15 years ago or so. So good for her for saying, okay, I was one of these people who was fooled, but I'm not. I don't have such a big ego that I'm not going to be in a film about her. So, good for her. Apparently other people were asked, and she was friends with Bono and a few other, or not she, he, she, or I guess they, because I think Savannah prefers to be called they. So they were friends with people like Bono, I think Oprah, other people, and apparently a lot of these big stars were approached to be in this film, and they all said no, except for Love. So you know what? Good for you, Courtney, that you're not afraid to well, you're not really poking fun at, yeah, maybe you are poking fun at yourself, but all right, good for you. So as I said, the film opens at September the 26th. It's going to be up against a lot of competition here in Hong Kong in the cinemas. A lot of other films are opening, so people are probably not going to see it. And but I'd say, yeah, wait for it to come to a streaming service. J.T. LeRoy. I think in some markets it's called Jeremiah Thunder LeRoy, which is what J.T. stands for. Don't ask. Watch the film to find out, or read the book, or whatever. Okay, my nose is running, so I'm going to have to wipe my nose here for a second. Oh, okay. The second film I'm going to talk about is It Chapter 2. And this is open. It opened yesterday in Hong Kong, and I think it's playing in many markets in the States and in the UK. So it's like a global rollout. Now, if you've seen the first chapter called It from 2 years ago, you know about the Losers Club from Derry, Maine. And they are back, but so too is Pennywise, that malevolent clown played by Bill Skarsgård, fabulous, who killed, well, Bill Skarsgård didn't, but Pennywise the clown killed little Georgie Denbrough and so many other children 27 years earlier, 1996. So now the film is 27 years later or was it 1989? So now it's 2016 is the time that It Chapter 2 takes place. Now, the film has, as I said, the film is here. It's floated into our cinemas like the red balloon, the iconic red balloon, but this time the balloon seems to have sprung a leak because that balloon comes crashing down pretty fast. You know, there's a few problems with this film, but the biggest one, which you've probably heard of, it is way too long. It is just short of 3 hours long. So, one of the issues I had with the first film was that it was too long. It was about 2.5 hours too long. I thought it was about 20 minutes too long. This is a good hour too long. And part of the problem is, the source material, Stephen King's book, 1,138 pages. It was going to be a challenge to keep it, brief without cutting it to pieces. But I don't think director Andy Muschietti and screenwriter Gary Doberman really cared, and they said, we're going to try to be faithful. I understand. I've never read the book, but I understand it is slightly different. They did change a few things, but generally they were quite faithful to the story, and we're left with this crazy long movie. So that's my biggest issue with this film. Now, if you haven't read the book, or perhaps you've been sleeping under a rock for the past 2 years and you don't know anything about it, the story with It Chapter 2 is now the losers, who are now 40-year-old adults. They've been called back to Derry by Mike, played by Isaiah Mustafa. If you remember, or if you don't know, Mike was the little black kid, African-American kid. Mike's now been living, we find out he's been living in Derry this whole time. Everyone else left except Mike. Now, since the gang first battled the clown decades before, Mike's been researching ancient Native American rituals, and guess what? He's come up with a ceremony that will rid Derry, and presumably everywhere else, of Pennywise once and for all. But two things need to happen first. The first thing is that Pennywise needs to come back to Derry, which he does, and the second is that Mike needs the gang to come back. They need to do this together. So when people start disappearing from Derry, Mike calls up Stuttering Bill, now played by James McAvoy, Trash Talking Richie, now played by Bill Hader, Chubby Lonely Heart Ben, played by Jay Ryan. I don't know who he is. I've never seen him in anything before. I think he's Australian or something, or New Zealand. I forget where he's from. You have hypochondriac mama's boy Eddie, played by James Ranson. I can't remember what I've seen him in. And you have token Jew Stanley. You know, it's funny with Stanley. I never understood what his issue was, other than being Jewish. But anyhow, we have token Jew Stanley, now played by Andy Bean, and we have abuse victim Beverly, now played by Jessica Chastain. Now, interestingly, each of them, except for Mike, each of them has buried their teenage trauma so deep into their subconscious that they barely remember any of it. However, once they come back together, well, first with Mike's phone call, it does release very visceral reactions from them. I won't tell you what, but once they do come back, the memories all come flooding back with Pennywise-assisted vengeance. And now they must band together to face their deepest, darkest fears to kill Pennywise. Now, if you've seen the first film, you're going to say to yourself, wait a second, didn't they do that in the first film? Yes, they did. And this is one of the other problems. This is basically the same film as the first one, but now they're 27 years older. You know, not much has changed. And you know, with the exception of one character who seems to have discovered the benefits of doing ab crunches in these 27 years, the kids haven't changed at all. Now, I'd like to think that I'm not the same person I was when I was 13 years old. God, I hope I'm not. You know, but these people haven't changed. They're just older. And I thought that was, look, as I said, I haven't read the book, I don't know. But I thought that was rather weak. That you know, you can still have, I feel you can still have some of these issues that you had when you were 13 years old, especially if they're so deeply ingrained, but they shouldn't be the complete you. And what I found with this film is that there was nothing new. These adult characters brought nothing new to these people that we met 27 years earlier or 2 years earlier, you know, that we saw the first time when they were 13 years old. They're exactly the same as they were when they were 13. You have Beverly, who, you know, in the first film, she was in an abusive relationship with her father. Now she's in an abusive relationship with her husband. I get that for sure. But what else about Beverly? What else do we know about Beverly? Zero. You have hypochondriac mama's boy Eddie, you know, who's still a hypochondriac, but now he's married to a woman who is pretty much the same, who's pretty much his mother. Okay, I get that too. You know, these things are real. But what else? You know, what else about, you know, has Eddie evolved in any other way since he was 13? And clearly he hasn't. So that's what I found with the writing this time with this film, is that these characters brought nothing new to who they were. So again, rather disappointing. So anyhow, you know, and here was another problem I have with this, is that with these characters being so deeply traumatized, you would think that one of them, at least one of them, would have gone for therapy at some point. Now, you know, like as I said earlier, these traumas were buried very deep in them. Let's carry that thought. You know, maybe they couldn't even articulate what was going on in their head, but it was influencing who they were as adults. So, and plus they had scars on their hands. You would think, if they don't even know what the scar is, you would think to go, I have a scar on my hand that I don't even know what it is, how I got it. Nobody seems to be able to remember how I got this scar. Maybe I need therapy to figure this out. So again, you know, I thought, come on, you know, I thought that was rather weak. And maybe that's part of Stephen King's story, you know, like, you know, the book was written, in 1990 or something? Who went to therapy in 1990? Anyhow, but back to the movie. You know, one of the things, I saw it a couple days ago, a friend of mine saw it last week, and I said to her, I don't even remember who's who in this film. So how am I going to place the adults with their with their teenage counterpart? And she said, no problem. The movie goes back and forth quite a bit. And in fact, it does. The director very wisely superimposes the characters on each other, the teenager and the adult. So you really get back into the zone very quickly. And very interestingly, as I watched the movie, I said to my friend, I said he clearly shot a lot of chapter 2 while he was filming chapter 1. Because the teenage kids, they haven't aged in 2 years. You know, from 13 to 15 is a big gap. And, you know, you would see the difference between 13 and 15. These actors are still 13. So he filmed a lot of it the first time out, which, I don't think people realize. Well, I'm sure some people realize. I didn't realize. So, yeah. Now, just as with the first film, there are so many characters and so many fears and phobias that Pennywise preys upon. It takes a while for Pennywise and us, by extension, the audience, to get through them all. And this was one of the issues I had with the first film, is that it's very repetitive as he goes through each one. You got 7 characters. As he goes through each one, it gets boring. And here it's the same problem again. I think at this section they could have combined a couple together, a couple kids together, because they're all running off on their own hunt to find this time what they have to do. Mike tells them they have to find some item that represents their deepest, darkest fear and bring that to this ritual that they're going to do to get rid of Pennywise. So for 45 minutes, we're watching each one of them go off and find that one item. They could have combined a few together, I think, or shortened them. It took a long time. Let's put it this way. And of course, each time that they're finding these things, Pennywise appears, not always as Pennywise. Pennywise, it seems, is more than just a clown. So, but he's not a very efficient killer, because each time that he goes after these kids, these adults now, they manage to get away, and it all leads to this grand, I'm not revealing anything here, it all leads to this grand showdown in the sewers under the dilapidated house. If you remember that from the first, it all comes back to there, of course. You know that it's going to come back to there. But you know what? Here's another thing that I have with this film. You would think, you got this house that's falling apart. You would think that after 27 years, the city would have knocked it down. So, okay, whatever. But on the other, let me just say something good about this film. There is a running joke through the film about Bill's latest book. Bill is now a novelist and he's a Hollywood screenwriter, and there's a running joke throughout the film that everybody's read his book, they like his book, but they don't like the endings. And this is a big thing that people say about Stephen King's book, and particularly his book. People say they like his books, but they don't like his endings. So, as I said earlier, very clearly, Bill is the literary avatar of Stephen King, and, they're even poking fun at, Stephen King is poking fun, or the writer. I don't know if that's in the book. I don't think that's in the book, but the writers are poking fun at Stephen King. And good for Stephen King for being a sport about it. Because clearly he knows that, he knew that they did this, and he was okay with that. So that was fun. That was fun. But anyhow, as far as performances go, I'd say all the adult actors do really good work. They're mimicking the behaviors and the language of their childhood counterparts. There's been talk in recent years that the Academy for Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences, the people behind the Oscar Awards, that they should have a category for casting directors. And when I heard about this last year, I thought, oh, come on, don't we have enough awards already? But I'll tell you something. The casting here was really inspired, because these actors not just look like their teenage counterparts, they acted like their teenage counterparts too. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to give a shout out to Rich Delia, who was the casting director of this film. I thought, if there should be a category for casting directors, you deserve a nomination, because I thought you did a great job. Anyhow, as for Skarsgård, he again is fabulous. I worry that he's going to be typecast from now on, but this is an iconic performance that's going to haunt the dreams of coulrophobics. You know what coulrophobics is? People who are fear of clowns. It's going to haunt their dreams for years to come. I mean, he's, he does the lip, and the drool and the whole thing. He's fabulous. So, all in all, the film's got a lot of faults, but it's not bad. It's still entertaining. It's still much better fare than most of the other films we see on the big screen. So if you can handle a 169-minute movie, you know, without going to the toilet 4 times, I didn't, but other people did. But I'd say go see it. You know, and especially if you've seen the first one, you know, you're sort of vested or invested. You have to see the second one. It's not a great film. It's not a great sequel, or not even. It's not even a sequel. It's a continuation. But yeah, it's all right. It's all right. So anyhow, that's it. Chapter 2. Wow, 9:02. I've been talking too long. So have a great weekend if you're Chinese or in Hong Kong, and Lunar Festival starts tonight, tomorrow night. I think it starts tonight. So happy holiday. See ya.